That Mental Ginger show is officially no more. I said that previously in the sense of the interviews were stopping, but now it's official in pretty much a legal sense and a monetary sense. Because on the 25th of June 2026, we got the official confirmation that That Mental Ginger show was demonetized and removed from the YouTube partner program. And this has been a bit of an interesting journey with That Mental Ginger show. Almost 6 years of my life kind of wrapped up in a bowl and put in a storage cupboard. So I'm going to try and use this video to break down how That Mental Ginger show came to be, what it meant for me going forward with everything that I've done in my content creation journey, why it got demonetized, and why I'm not scrambling or rushing to even attempt to try and get it out of demonetization. Now, some points I may correct myself and get some information confused. 6 years is a long time. A lot of things have happened to me in my personal life and professional life since then. But I'll do my best. And I think the best way to do it is to talk about where I was when That Mental Ginger show started. And this was all the way back in 2020. Now, this was when I was working full-time in the financial sector. I had not really done anything of any performance-related value since 2013. I think I'd released one parody album, and that was about it. My life was pretty much on the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 grind. Finance job, had my wife. I don't mean had my wife, I mean, you guys know what I mean. Like, I settled down. But I did have my two beautiful boys in 2018. So it was really the bog standard, everyday, normal man for me. As much as that is hard to believe. But things were plodding along relatively okay. Do a job, come home, look after kids, have the occasional mental breakdown. I think I was averaging a mental breakdown every 2 years. From about, let's see if I've got my maths right with this one, 2008. So every 2 years, roughly on the dot, something would happen that would break my mental health. And then the biggest attempt to break all of our mental health happened on March 23rd, 2020. That was the day that the UK went into lockdown from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, whether you think that COVID was a conspiracy or not, that's not my bag to talk about that or even think about that. All I know is what was the reality of that time. We were put into a lockdown. Only essential workers were allowed to go to work. Now, I've always believed that my job was not an essential job, but I was sent out to work. Despite me having two young children, and there could have been options to work from home, I was sent out to work. I always equate it to it was the Lord Farquhar meme. Some of you may die, but that's a chance I am willing to take. But I was trying to suck it up, because there was parts of COVID that I liked. One of which was there was hardly anybody around. And I got an excuse to isolate and be away from people. There's not a lot about that for me. But I wanted to try and make sure that I kept my mental health on an even keel. So I came up with a little idea. Why don't I record some daft things in my car with my old laptop, get some guests on by sending voice recordings, and I do a very brief podcasty edited job. And these were the initial musings of That Mental Ginger show. And they were not good in the sense of my editing, my quality, all that kind of stuff. You look back at those ones, it was actually me just attempting to do something to keep myself sane without any skill to really do it. The early theme tune was just me whistling and banging a couple of pots and pans together. And the numbers, well, they weren't exactly there. But I wasn't expecting them to be there. It was just something to keep me going during a tough time. And then I took not well with my mental health and decided that I wanted to try and do something to help the people that helped me during one of the most difficult times of my life, and decided to record the Flower of Scotland cover. And that was how I came into contact with Scuffed Studios. For those that maybe don't know, the Flower of Scotland cover was a cover of Flower of Scotland, something I wanted to do for about 12 years at that point. Managed to save up a bit of money, and I got singers I knew, musicians I knew, and we all agreed to attempt this balls to the wall idea. And with Scuff Studios, I had a place where I could record it. And this relit the fire for performing and helping others that I always had inside me. And we raised £750 for the Scottish Association of Mental Health. And in between times I'd done kind of the 2.0 of That Mental Ginger show, where I'd had some in-person interviews, but I was still sticking with the same kind of format that I had had previously, where it was just audio and we weren't showing our faces. But once I found out the rates for Scuff Studios, I thought, I'm going to really make an attempt at this and see how it's going to go. Get some guests in, we have a studio space, the guys at Scuff Studios had the skill for the audio and videography, and we'll see how long this is going to run. They're making those slight tweaks, and with it still being COVID and lockdown still being kind of in place by this point, around the 2021 mark, we were just kind of easing the restrictions at this point. It was what I didn't know to be the ideal time for dropping such content. Everybody was stuck in, they had nowhere to go, nothing to keep themselves entertained. And this revamped and refreshed version of That Mental Ginger show, better videography, better sound production, we were actually on screen when we were doing the interviews, and I commissioned a friend of mine, Greg Friel, who had helped with the production of Flower of Scotland, to come up with the jingle for That Mental Ginger show. All these things created a kind of perfect storm for That Mental Ginger show to get to where it needed to go. And a couple of associates of mine managed to help on the back end with SEO analytics and all the stuff that I didn't have a clue about. Put it all together, and That Mental Ginger show hit a boom period that I was not expecting. Subscribers increasing not just by the hundreds, but sometimes by the thousands. View counts skyrocketing. Guests wanting to come on left, right and centre. It was crazy. I was going from just having maybe like a once a month session where we're in the recording studio and getting 3, maybe 4 guests in, batch recording and releasing once a week, to having to increase the studio time, get international guests on via Zoom, and I was pumping out content once a week, once a fortnight, to 2 a week. Because the demand across all avenues was there. And I pushed myself very, very hard. And then I thought, I'm going to try and branch out and do something else. See if it's just That Mental Ginger show that I'm getting the traction for, or if there's other things that people are more interested in. So then I set up the Ginger Engine, and similar results. And then we set up Super Geeked, where I let my friend Kev Tierney take over the helm of that. And this channel has now become Gentle Dorks, and it is fluctuating between high end of 3,000 and 4,000 subscribers. So it was really a whirlwind of timing, the right team, working as hard as I could. But I was still trying to manage a 9-to-5 job, still trying to be a dad, still trying to be a husband. So we get to mid-2022, and I decided to take a bit of a leap of faith. I got offered a job with a production company, which meant I could leave my 9-to-5 job and provide what I thought at the time was a better quality of life for my family. And at the same time, that was when I set up Ginger Media. Because I'd been down these types of roads before and thought, if there's going to be something and it's going to come back and bite me in the ass, I need to have a fallback. I need to have something that I can then take over with my own media, my own content, and try and get things going. And at this point, there was 3 monetized channels, so I needed to combine them all into one company, or there could have been 3 sets of tax to pay. So 12th of July 2022, Ginger Media was officially formed. But the tail end of 2022, that was when the problems began. That production job turned out to be not even worth the paper it was printed on. I took a major gamble and I lost. I lost to the point where I was thousands of pounds in debt. And anybody that's been in debt before knows that it's not just the debt that gets you, it's all the mental tolls that it takes. And I was not becoming a good person at this point because I was so stressed, I was so done in with feeling like life was shafting me at every single turn. I was feeling like a bad dad, I was feeling like a bad husband, I felt like I let my entire family down, myself down. There was a smear campaign against me, which was not good, because a lot of people believed the smear campaign, and I don't actually blame you for believing it. To the outside world, I was just a disgruntled guy who didn't exactly play the game. So I had to try and crawl back to the admin jobs. The job that I left didn't want me back, and that was fine. was perfectly okay with that. But needs must, and I had to try and do something. So I got a part-time job because the media company was still in its infancy. It was just coming up in 1 year, and that was my goal. I wanted it to last at least 1 year. I went into this part-time job, and mentally I just was not there. There was too much going on. I was in such a bad space. And then we all know what happened in 2023. Everything went to shit. I had to leave home, made homeless. One point I was sleeping in my car and went to live in temporary accommodation, which is essentially sheltered housing. So everything hit the skids with lots of productions, including that Mental Ginger show, because I was so burned out with everything that had happened, and I had nowhere to do any more interviews. But those interviews were dying on the vine. Enough damage had been done to my reputation from those little smear campaigns that no one wanted anything to do with me. And again, I totally understand that. When I had to kind of put that release out saying everything needs to stop right now, I'm in trouble, and I have to focus on getting better, the little quote from Robert Downey Jr. really springs into your head. Lose everything and you find out who your real family and your real friends are. But one thing I didn't lose was getting my media company beyond the 1 year mark. I was literally writing out parts of my company accounts while sitting in the back of my car not even knowing if I had a place to sleep. And through that I kind of realised something. I'm a lot tougher than I give myself credit for. I have a lot more self-belief than I give myself credit for. And all the people that cut me off, fuck them. I don't need them. Good riddance to bad rubbish was the mantra that I used for a long time, because I had certain things I wanted to do. Get back to my wife, get back to my kids, and keep my media company going. Be damned with everything else. So, everything pretty much ground to a halt. The Ginger Engine didn't. I managed to keep that going, but that Mental Ginger show, it came to a crashing end. I didn't have money to pay for a studio. I didn't have guests that wanted to associate with me anymore. And because I didn't have the money to pay for the studio, I also didn't have the money to get the professional editing and SEO analytics done that I'd been getting done previously. So all of it went from boom to bust. From 10,000 subscribers and thousands of views to still the 10,000 subscribers, but you were lucky if the views were hitting 30. Because the infrastructure that you need to keep something like that going, if you don't have the skills yourself, it completely shafts you. Because the money was no longer rolling in, I couldn't pay for the expert services that I was needing to make it the show that everybody loved. It became essentially a generic Zoom show, and people didn't want to see that. They liked the production value, they liked the quality, and I didn't have the skills to match that quality at that point in time. But audiences didn't know any of this because what was I supposed to do? Admit that I was a complete failure and I fucked everything up? No, I had more important things in my mind at that point in time. Like rebuilding my life, getting a flat, figuring out if I could even afford to eat. Once everything went to hell in 2023, I had to have 2 psychiatric assessments, and both of them said, you can't work a proper job anymore. And that puts the fear into you right away, because I'd just done the accounts for my first year of Ginger Media. So I had a couple of long and uncomfortable talks with the people that gave me the assessments. I explained that legally everything was above board, but I wasn't making any money. And by that I mean I wasn't making any money that I could live off of. And I was having to shift to benefits. What situation does that put me in? And the answer was very simple. Until your company's making enough money that you can live off it month to month, you get benefits. And realistically, you're not going to cross that bridge for a very long time. So carry on doing what you're doing. And as uncomfortable as that conversation was, it gave me a little bit of freedom. I could go back to doing what I wanted to do and get myself better and really focus on my recovery. And then I started seeing a real dynamic shift in the Ginger Engine. The Ginger Engine was becoming the YouTube channel that everybody sees as a thriving, successful YouTube channel. There was community engagement, people were commenting on the videos, the views were starting to creep up, and I was starting to make more revenue. That Mental Ginger show, from the storefront, looked like the superior brand. the 10,000 subscribers, the multitudes of videos and interviews, and the thousands of views. But then I started digging a little deeper into the analytics because I was really trying to boost my knowledge. And it turns out that channel had been in trouble for a very long time. The revenue it was bringing in wasn't even clearing a couple of pounds a month. Now, a couple of pounds is better than nothing, but when you look at the views that it was pulling, it should have been making more, but it wasn't. And I know that because the Ginger Engine was becoming the legitimate channel of my company. Lower subscriber count, lower view count, but the revenue was much higher and stronger because it was hitting all the other points that Mental Ginger show was not hitting. The interviews weren't being seen as evergreen content. People weren't clicking on them and seeing it as a viable option to find quality entertainment. And the audience had changed as well, because we were now in 2023, 2024, and we were out of COVID. Everybody was back to, well, some sort of normality, which meant one thing. The mental health conversations, they didn't want to watch them anymore. They didn't have time for them anymore. We have our own lives, we need to get back to them. Fuck that. So it was now becoming less of a valuable asset to a business, and it was just really becoming a thing that if I wanted to pick it up, do a couple of videos, just to keep the monetization and YouTube partner program options going, then I had to do it. I didn't want to do it anymore. So I made a decision that I was stopping that Mental Ginger show. The interviews were coming to a halt. I was getting a batch of guests on that wanted to be on, and it was over. It took a couple of goes because there were some guests that had wanted to be in the show from the final run who I had to kind of bring back and wrap up in my final run. But it finally ended. And I was glad for those last interviews because it did prove the point that I'd made earlier. The show was on life support. Many people would be frustrated and disappointed because it wasn't getting the views that it used to in its pop. The thousands of views became tens of views. A good performing video at that time was if it got over 100. And I know I don't look it, but I have a bit of pride. And seeing how badly those videos were performing, no matter what I was trying to do, and I was having to do it myself because I was never going to be able to afford the heights and the production quality that I wanted in the past. And my priority had totally shifted to the Ginger Engine. The Ginger Engine is fun. It's hard work, but it's fun. It's about a subject that I'm passionate about. I am very passionate about mental health, as you all know, but I'm passionate about it, and so is my audience. My audience for that Mental Ginger show, after digging a little deeper, turns out it did not exist. I'll let you guys figure out what I mean by it did not exist. Mentally, I had kind of clocked out. I had done what I wanted to do with that Mental Ginger show. I was busy with the Ginger Engine. I was busy getting actual paid contracts to keep the business afloat. They became my priority. That Mental Ginger show did not. And then I got word that the channel was demonetized. And I was expecting to be a lot sadder than I was. I was sad. I mean, you pour 6 years of your life into something, you're going to be upset if you're told it's done. But I wasn't as sad as I thought I would be. I actually felt kind of relieved because a lot of people look at the storefront window of that Mental Ginger show and think there's a thriving, viable, successful YouTube channel that needs to be revitalised. It needs to come back and be stronger than it was before. It was only strong for a short period of time. And that time came and went at lightning speed. This is not uncommon with YouTube channels, as I've now found out because I put the work in other channels. If you get that successful boom period, you're going to fall a lot quicker. You need to build up slow, build your audience, and really put the work in. Now, I'm not saying we didn't put the work in. The people in front of the camera and behind the camera put the work in. But the real true results weren't there. They were just numbers on a screen to please a very naive ginger person that didn't know any better at that point in time. So when I read that email and looked at the YouTube Studio analytics, I was okay. It finally just signed off that show for me. And it's a bit of a longer video than expected, with a lot of tangents here, there and everywhere, and it's because the journey of that Mental Ginger show is not a straight line. Now, I know I've said it's a boom and bust, but it's not even just a complete rise and a complete fall. It started out as a labour of love, a way to try and keep myself entertained and help my own mental health through challenging times. Then it became a cause, a mission to raise awareness of mental health. Then it became a business. Do these videos because it's part of your business, and if you don't do them, you are in trouble. Then it became, we don't necessarily want to associate with this channel anymore, and we don't want to be around you anymore. Then it became, the person running this channel and company is going through his own mental health issues. Can we actually trust somebody that's going through his own mental health issues to give us advice on how to stay positive in our own mental well-being? And finally it became, what was that show again? Oh, the guy that does the Thomas the Tank Engine channel. So what do I think that Mental Ginger show's legacy is going to be? It's an interesting question, and one I've been thinking about for the last couple of weeks. I think that Mental Ginger show's legacy is essentially my education period. Now by that I mean, people go to college or university to get their diploma, get their degree, get experience, and then move out into the working world. That Mental Ginger show is essentially me earning my stripes in content creation, videography, audio production, SEO, metadata. An average run from college to university is 4 years. I spent 6 of them doing that Mental Ginger show. So I count that as my degree. Not one that will ever be officially recognised by education authorities, but something that I can hold my head up high and say, I went through every ringer that a content creator has to offer doing that channel. Feeling like a failure at the start. Getting the dizzying highs when all of a sudden the subscribers and the view counts finally hit. The adulation and the plaudits and the praise from people when it was in its pomp. And then the failure that I felt, the imposter syndrome that I felt, the audience no longer being there, the guests no longer wanting to come on because it didn't seem like a viable option for them to promote their own wares anymore. And at the end of the day, it joins many of the other YouTube channels that fall into obscurity.